I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
For more than 2 years, one of the most private mysteries surrounding King Charles has remained almost completely untouched. It involves 2 sealed letters, a final red box, and words written by Queen Elizabeth II during the closing days of her life. One letter was intended for her son. The other was addressed to the man who served as her private secretary. Neither letter has been publicly released. Neither recipient has revealed what was written. And because the Queen spent 70 years choosing her words with extraordinary care, the silence surrounding those final messages has created a question that refuses to disappear. What did Elizabeth want Charles to know when she was no longer there to tell him herself? Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. Some people believe the answer may be simple. Perhaps the letter contained a mother's final expression of love, encouragement, or private advice to the son preparing to take the throne. Others wonder whether it addressed the future of the monarchy, the pressure awaiting Charles, or the complicated history that had surrounded his marriage to Camilla for decades. There is no public evidence proving that the letter contained a warning, a secret, or anything controversial. But the circumstances in which it was discovered have made the mystery difficult to ignore. Before we examine the final letters, the long history between Queen Elizabeth, King Charles, and Queen Camilla, and the reason this private message continues to attract attention, welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. The story begins at Balmoral Castle in Scotland on September 8, 2022. Queen Elizabeth II died peacefully at the age of 96, ending the longest reign in British history. Even during her final months, she remained closely connected to the responsibilities of the crown. Her health had become increasingly fragile, but the habits built over decades did not disappear. Official papers continued to reach her. Government matters continued to require her attention. The monarch, who had served through 15 British prime ministers, remained committed to her constitutional role until the very end. One of the strongest symbols of that commitment was the famous red dispatch box. Throughout her reign, these boxes carried important government documents, ministerial reports, diplomatic correspondence, and other papers requiring the sovereign's attention. They followed her whether she was at Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Balmoral, or another royal residence. The Queen was known for reading carefully, asking questions, and adding handwritten observations. Her role was constitutional rather than political, but she took the responsibility seriously. The red boxes represented more than a daily routine. They were a physical connection between the monarch and the government. They arrived regularly, including when Elizabeth was traveling or away from London. Over the years, the public came to associate the familiar red leather cases with her discipline, consistency, and extraordinary sense of duty. Then, after her death, something unexpected was reportedly found among the official papers. According to royal author Robert Hardman, who examined the transition from Elizabeth's reign to that of King Charles III in his book The Making of a King, a final red box contained 2 private letters alongside official documents. One was addressed to Charles. The other was intended for Sir Edward Young, the Queen's private secretary. The discovery immediately raised questions because these were not ordinary government papers. They were personal messages placed inside an object closely associated with the Queen's public responsibilities. The letters were sealed, and their contents were not made public. As far as publicly available information shows, neither Charles nor Young has discussed what Elizabeth wrote. That silence has become the center of the mystery. Queen Elizabeth was not known for dramatic public displays of emotion. She rarely explained her private feelings in interviews. She did not publish personal memoirs. When difficult family events became public, she usually responded through carefully chosen statements rather than emotional revelations. Her ability to separate personal feeling from public duty became one of the defining features of her reign. Because of that, a private letter written near the end of her life naturally carries emotional weight, even when its contents remain unknown. What did she tell Charles? Did she write about the responsibilities he was about to inherit? Did she offer guidance about leading the monarchy during a period of political uncertainty and public change? Did she reflect on their relationship as mother and son? Or did she address the woman who would soon stand beside him as queen? There is no confirmed answer. Yet the timing of the letter has encouraged renewed attention to one of the most complicated relationships in modern royal history, the long journey from Queen Elizabeth's early resistance to Camilla's eventual acceptance within the monarchy. Only months before her death, Elizabeth made a major public statement concerning Camilla's future title. In February 2022, during her Platinum Jubilee year, the Queen expressed her sincere wish that Camilla would be known as Queen Consort when Charles became king. The announcement was historically significant. For many years, public discussion had suggested that Camilla might use the title Princess Consort rather than Queen Consort. The issue was sensitive because of the history surrounding Charles's first marriage to Diana, Princess of Wales, and the public controversy that followed the breakdown of that marriage. Elizabeth's statement changed the direction of the conversation. It gave Camilla a clear public endorsement from the monarch herself. When Charles became king later that year, Camilla became Queen Consort, and during the coronation in 2023, she was crowned alongside him. But the public endorsement came after decades of tension, controversy, and gradual change. To understand why the final letter continues to attract speculation, it is necessary to return to the period when Camilla was not accepted by large parts of the public and was reportedly viewed with deep concern by members of the royal family. Charles first met Camilla Shand in the early 1970s. They formed a close relationship, but their lives moved in different directions. Charles entered military service, while Camilla later married Andrew Parker Bowles. Charles eventually married Diana Spencer in 1981. Years later, Charles and Camilla renewed their relationship while both were still married to other people. The situation became increasingly damaging as the marriage between Charles and Diana collapsed under intense public scrutiny. By the early 1990s, private details of Charles and Camilla's relationship had become public. A recorded telephone conversation between them was published after being intercepted, creating one of the most embarrassing scandals of the period. The controversy damaged Charles's reputation and intensified public anger toward Camilla. Diana's popularity continued to grow, while Camilla became a symbol of the pain many people associated with the royal marriage. Queen Elizabeth witnessed the entire crisis. She saw the effect on the monarchy. She watched the press coverage become increasingly hostile. She understood that the breakdown of Charles and Diana's marriage was no longer a private family matter. It had become a threat to public confidence in the institution she had spent her life serving. Several royal authors have described Elizabeth as deeply unhappy with the situation. Some accounts claim that she used harsh private language when discussing Camilla. However, many of the most dramatic quotations repeated in royal commentary are based on secondhand reports rather than publicly released recordings or documents. They should therefore be treated carefully. What is clear is that Elizabeth did not immediately welcome Camilla into the center of royal life. For years, Camilla's presence at major events remained limited. Royal appearances were carefully managed. Public acceptance did not happen overnight. It developed gradually through a long process involving Charles's determination, Camilla's public work, and the monarchy's efforts to move beyond the controversies of the 1990s. The distance between Elizabeth and Camilla was therefore real in the sense that their relationship had to be rebuilt over time. But the complete private story remains known only to the people who lived through it. This is where the sealed letter becomes so intriguing. Elizabeth publicly supported Camilla's future role in February 2022. Later that year, she left a private letter for Charles. Both events occurred during the final chapter of her life. Both involved the same son. Both were connected, at least indirectly, to the future of the monarchy. But public support and private conversation are not necessarily identical. The public statement was designed for the nation. It was carefully written and released through official channels. It addressed a constitutional and ceremonial question that had followed Charles and Camilla for years. A private letter would have served an entirely different purpose. It could have contained affection. It could have offered reassurance. It could have included advice about the challenges Charles would face. It may have said nothing about Camilla at all. The truth is that no one outside the recipients knows. Still, the Queen's long history of separating duty from personal emotion makes the unanswered question compelling. Throughout her reign, Elizabeth worked with governments of different political views. She attended events because duty required it. She maintained public relationships regardless of private preferences. Her personal opinions were rarely allowed to interfere with her constitutional responsibilities. That ability to divide the private from the public was one of her greatest strengths. So it is understandable that some observers wonder whether her private letter to Charles might have carried a more personal message than her public statement about Camilla. But wondering is not the same as knowing. The letter may have been completely consistent with Elizabeth's public endorsement. It may have offered Charles a private blessing. It may have expressed confidence in his marriage. It may have reflected the forgiveness and acceptance that many people believe developed during the final years of her life. Or it may have focused entirely on Charles himself. The mystery exists because the letter has not been revealed, not because its contents have been proven to be controversial. Another important part of the story involves Prince Philip. During the difficult years of Charles and Diana's marriage, Philip exchanged personal letters with Diana. Some of those letters later became public, offering a rare look at private discussions within the royal family. Philip sometimes expressed sympathy for Diana and frustration over the crisis surrounding the marriage. He encouraged both Charles and Diana to examine their actions and consider how the situation could be resolved. Some reports have emphasized his negative views of Charles's relationship with Camilla. However, the surviving correspondence also shows that Philip's position was more complicated than a simple attack on one person. He attempted to understand the failures on both sides and eventually acknowledged that the marriage had become deeply troubled. The letters are important because private royal correspondence can sometimes become public years later. History is filled with examples. Diaries have been published. Personal letters have entered archives. Private conversations have appeared in biographies. Documents once believed to be inaccessible have later provided new insight into major historical figures. That pattern is one reason the Queen's final letters continue to attract interest. Could they someday be released? Possibly. But there is no indication that Charles has any obligation to publish a private message from his mother. Some royal documents remain confidential for decades. Others are protected permanently. Privacy is especially important when correspondence concerns family relationships rather than official government business. The public may never know what Elizabeth wrote. And perhaps that is exactly what she intended. Over time, however, the relationship between Elizabeth and Camilla changed in ways that were visible to the public. A significant moment came in 2002, when Camilla attended the funeral of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. Her presence was viewed as a sign that she was gradually becoming more accepted within royal circles. Camilla then focused on public service. She supported causes involving literacy, domestic abuse survivors, and other charitable work. She generally avoided giving the media the kind of dramatic material that had surrounded the royal family during the previous decade. Her approach was cautious. She did not attempt to recreate Diana's public image. She did not seek to dominate royal attention. Instead, she developed a quieter role built around consistent engagements and long-term charitable work. Charles and Camilla married in April 2005. The wedding was a civil ceremony, and Queen Elizabeth did not attend the ceremony itself. However, she attended the blessing and hosted a reception at Windsor Castle. Her participation signaled that the marriage had received formal acceptance within the royal family. The Queen's actions that day were meaningful. She did not need to make the occasion more public than necessary. Yet she hosted the celebration and addressed the guests. The moment suggested that the family was moving forward, even though the past could not be erased. Over the following years, Camilla became increasingly established as a senior working royal. She attended state occasions. She traveled overseas. She supported Charles during public engagements. Her role became familiar to the public, and her approval ratings gradually improved. Then came Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee message. By expressing her wish that Camilla would become Queen Consort, Elizabeth gave her the strongest public endorsement possible. The woman once associated with one of the monarchy's most painful periods was now being prepared to stand beside the future king. When Charles became monarch in September 2022, Camilla assumed the role of Queen Consort. At the coronation in May 2023, she was crowned beside him at Westminster Abbey. The symbolism was extraordinary. For decades, Camilla's future had appeared uncertain. There had been questions about whether the public would ever accept her. There had been debate about what title she would use. There had been years when her presence at major events remained controversial. Yet she ultimately became queen. That journey makes the sealed letter even more fascinating, not because it proves a hidden conflict, but because it represents the private side of a public transformation. Elizabeth had publicly supported Camilla. But what did she say privately to Charles? Perhaps she wrote that she was proud of him. Perhaps she reminded him that the monarchy would demand sacrifices. Perhaps she encouraged him to trust Camilla. Perhaps she warned him to protect the institution above personal interests. Or perhaps the letter contained no advice at all. It may simply have been a final message between a mother and her son. The absence of information allows every possibility to grow. Charles has not publicly quoted the letter. He has not described opening it. He has not explained whether it brought comfort or contained guidance. He has not used it in speeches about his mother. That silence may appear unusual to people who expect major royal moments to be explained publicly. But silence can have many meanings. It may represent grief. It may reflect a promise of privacy. It may indicate that the letter was too personal to share. It may simply mean that Charles believes the message belongs to him alone. The fact that the letter remains private does not prove that it contains a scandal. Still, the circumstances surrounding it are remarkable. Elizabeth placed a personal letter inside the red box associated with her official work. She did not leave it openly displayed in a private room. She did not publicly mention it. She allowed it to be discovered among the documents connected